Navigating your child's early development can be filled with so many questions, right? Well, today we're going to create a really clear and supportive guide to one of the most important topics for many parents, understanding the early signs of autism. And look, this isn't about creating worry at all. It's about empowering you with knowledge. All right, so let's just jump right into the big one, the question that's probably on your mind. While a really reliable diagnosis is possible by age 2, the signs themselves, they can often be picked up even earlier, around 18 months. And spotting these signs early, well, that is the key that unlocks absolutely everything else. And this is why it matters so much. So what's with this number, 65%? That's the percentage of kids who get a diagnosis and start intervention before they're 2.5 who show significant developmental improvements. I mean, that is a massive leap compared to only 23% for kids who get diagnosed later. It just goes to show you time is truly of the essence here. So let's get crystal clear on the why behind all this. I really want to frame this not as something to be scared of, but as an incredible window of opportunity and hope. Early detection isn't just about getting a label. It's a launch pad for incredible support. And the science behind this hope? It's actually pretty fascinating. It all comes down to something called brain plasticity, which just means the brain is at its most adaptable. Think of it like soft clay, just super ready to learn and forge new connections. This unique window is exactly why early intervention can be so profoundly effective, making a real, tangible difference in a child's developmental journey. Okay, so what are we actually looking for? I want you to think of the signs we're about to talk about not as these scary red flags, but more like, well, like developmental guideposts. They're just points of reference on the amazing journey of your child's growth. So we've broken these guideposts down into 4 key age ranges, starting at 6 months and going all the way up to 36 months. This timeline is going to be our roadmap for what might be popping up at each different stage. So in that very first year, the signs can be really subtle. For instance, some fascinating research shows that babies who are later diagnosed might actually start making less eye contact, starting as early as 2 months old. You might also see less interest in those little back-and-forth games like peekaboo, or maybe not as much waving. Now, as we get closer to that 1-year mark, communication really takes center stage. This is when you'd hope to hear those first babbles, see them turn their head when you call their name, or notice them pointing at things they think are cool. That pointing, it's a huge part of what experts call joint attention. And it's really just that simple, beautiful moment of, hey, look at this with me, sharing an experience together. All right, moving into this next stage, this is where you'd expect language to really start taking off. So some signs might become more apparent here. This could include a pretty small vocabulary, maybe not a lot of imaginative play, or less of what's called social reciprocity. That sweet back and forth of smiles and sounds you share with your little one. Now, when we get into the toddler years, the guideposts often have to do with more complex social stuff. You might notice a child who has little interest in other kids, or a kiddo who gets really upset by tiny changes in their routine. This is also when heightened sensitivities to things like sounds, lights, or even textures might become more obvious. Okay, so let's say you've been noticing some of these guideposts. What's next? What are the official steps? Let's totally demystify the whole screening and diagnosis process so you know exactly what to expect. The American Academy of Pediatrics, or the AAP, has a really clear 2-step approach. Your pediatrician should be doing general developmental check-ins at 9, 18, and 30 months. And this is the big one. They also recommend autism-specific screenings for all kids at their 18 and 24-month checkups. And this is a great look at how that screening actually works. It often uses a tool called the MCHAT-R. And as you can see, the scores fall into 3 simple buckets. Low risk, 0 to 2, no action needed for now. Medium risk, 3 to 7, that triggers a follow-up chat. And high risk, 8 or more, that means an immediate referral for a full evaluation. See? It's a really straightforward system. But, getting a diagnosis isn't always as simple as checking off boxes on a list. There are a few really important, kind of subtle things that can affect the whole process, and just being aware of them is a huge advantage. Okay, this is so important, especially for parents of little girls. Research shows that autism can look very different in girls. They can be really skilled at something called masking, which is basically imitating social behaviors to blend in. Their intense interests might also seem more socially typical, like being super into animals or a certain pop star. And all of this means girls are often missed or diagnosed much later than boys are.
Okay, another really critical idea to understand is something called regression. So, as this shows, a pretty big chunk of kids with autism, anywhere from 13 to almost 50%, actually lose skills they once had. This usually happens between 15 and 30 months, and it could be a loss of words, social skills, you name it.
But here is the absolute crucial takeaway from the research. Even in these cases of regression, those very subtle early signs we talked about, they were often there before the more obvious loss of skills happened. This just hammers home how incredibly important it is to pay attention to those super early developmental guideposts. All right, this brings us to what is, honestly, the most hopeful part of this whole conversation. After a diagnosis, what comes next? This is where we see the true power of early intervention really shine. So, one of the most heavily researched and effective therapies out there for young children with autism is called the Early Start Denver Model, or ESDM. It's basically a comprehensive, play-based therapy designed specifically for toddlers. And honestly, the results are just, wow. They're stunning. In a major study, kids who got ESDM therapy saw their IQ scores improve by an average of almost 18 points. Now compare that to just a 4-point bump for kids in other community programs. The data speaks for itself, right? It just shows what a profound impact this kind of early support can have.
And it didn't even stop there. That same group saw an 18-point jump in their receptive language skills. That's their ability to understand language. And get this, 7 of the kids in that group improved so much that their diagnosis was actually changed from autism to PDD-NOS, which was a diagnosis for a much milder set of challenges on the spectrum. Only 1 child in the other group saw that kind of change. I mean, that's what's possible.
So, after all of this, where does that leave you? We know those first few years are when the brain is most open to change, offering the greatest chance to make a real difference. That first step, it's yours to take. Maybe it's learning the milestones, maybe it's talking with your pediatrician, or maybe it's just asking for a screening. You have the power to get this journey started.